Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. Before I introduce our guest, I want to give a shout out to the Refresh Working Group, which is a group that is now sort of being led by Food Tank to look at the role technology plays in the food system, both domestically and internationally. This was a group started with Google and the Swell Creative Group about 2 years ago, and Food Tank has really been honored to be a part of it. And so now we're sort of the coordinators of this amazing group of farmers and researchers and technology folks like our guest today who are doing amazing things to study sort of the pluses and minuses of using technology in different ways. And my thoughts around technology have always sort of centered on, who benefits from the technology. Is it solving a real problem? Who's making money? Those are the kinds of questions this group is asking, and it's been really interesting over the last couple of years to learn from all these great folks. And so stay tuned for more information about the Refresh Working Group. You can also Google it and learn more, but we'll be coming out with a policy platform in the coming weeks to really sort of show how we're thinking about these things and a little bit about the strategy of moving forward. I'm really excited today because I get to chat with Sofia Elizondo, who is the co-founder and chief operations officer of Brightseed, which is a biotechnology startup company in San Francisco that is using artificial intelligence technology to uncover natural plant compounds that they believe can improve human health. Brightseed discovered a phytonutrient that improves the liver's ability to metabolize fats, which could potentially prevent or treat diseases like type 2 diabetes. Sophia, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks. It's so good to be here, Danny. Thanks for having me.
So, a lot of our listeners, hear words like phytonutrients and they sort of vaguely understand what they are. And, I always need sort of a primer on these things, even though I went to a school of nutrition. So I'm wondering if you can tell us what is a phytonutrient and what does it do?
For sure, absolutely. Plants create many things. When you take a plant apart, you basically have four broad categories of things. You have proteins, which you're very familiar with. We have lipids or fats, like olive oil is an example, carbohydrates or fibers. And then the fourth thing they produce are small natural compounds, which are called phytonutrients. Some of these are bioactive in our bodies when we eat them. They create all kinds of um, uh, interactions and positive effects. And so those in particular are the phytonutrients. And plants are chock full of them. They're really, really important compounds. The pharmaceutical industry has
Sure.
derived a lot of drugs from them. They're exciting little elements in plants.
And they're really important to our own human health.
Precisely, precisely. It's a lot of academic circles call the world of phytonutrients the dark matter of nutrition because they're really important for human health. They interact with essentially biological receptors in our bodies, but it's really hard to know what they are.
Hmm.
They've Science really only knows less than 1% of them, even though they've been around for centuries. And there's a lot of ancient wisdom that proves that they can be very impactful. And a lot of drugs have been derived from them as well. We have only scratched the surface of where these phytonutrients are and what they can do for health. So it's a really exciting time to be entering this space with new technologies.
Yeah, it's always very interesting to me the lack of investment in nutrition, specifically, whether we're talking about nutrition in the global south or nutrition here in the United States. And I think one thing that COVID-19 has sort of demonstrated is that we need more investment in nutrition. And you mentioned something very interesting to me that I hope you can delve more, a little bit more into, is this idea of ancient wisdom that we can sort of go forward by going back and looking at some of the techniques that ancient cultures and even current cultures and current indigenous peoples and native peoples, what they've been doing around food and nutrition and making it more accessible.
I mean, 100% on both of those points. I think COVID has brought to the forefront the imperative for proactive and preventative health. After age, the driving factor for complications of COVID is your underlying metabolic health, and that means conditions like obesity and hypertension and diabetes. So which unfortunately is a very large part of the United States and increasingly a large part of populations worldwide, even
Right.
in countries that are developing. So it's mind-blowing to think, to your point on investment in nutrition, it's mind-blowing to think that the single most important lever for health worldwide is not medicine, is not a healthcare system, it's diet.
Right.
That diet is the leading cause for premature deaths worldwide. So it's a really important place to focus on for health impact.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you're using biotechnology to sort of uh, figure out how to use phytonutrients to improve human health. How does that work? How are you using artificial intelligence to do that?
Yeah, yeah. Why would you need to marry artificial intelligence with ancient wisdom is another way of asking that. I love it. We've I mentioned that science knows relatively little of these phytonutrients. So the first way in which we use our AI is to illuminate what's there. We use artificial intelligence technology to understand and see further into the world of phytonutrients that other scientific techniques have enabled us to do. And then we use AI to predict what kind of impact these phytonutrients can have on health. And all of this it's called an in silico prediction. It's basically done in computational algorithms. And then Brightseed takes those predictions and validates them with biological assays or experiments to make sure that indeed what our AI technology predicted indeed is having the health benefit that we think it can.
Hmm.
And so far, it's yielded really, really amazing results. We can indeed see further than ever before, and we can indeed predict with a better degree of precision that we have ever been able to do before. So AI in this case is very much in the service of deeper understanding of nature, which is a really lovely way to use cutting edge technology today.
Yeah, I've never heard it quite said like that, but that's really eloquent. We just had a reader who thought a listener who thought the same thing. Can we talk more about this idea of predicting impacts? How does that work? I think that's really this interesting part. You're not modeling, you're making predictions.
Yeah, and it starts with understanding where we are now. The world has a lot of knowledge. You mentioned ancient wisdom earlier. There are civilizations with centuries of wisdom, and there is an entire biomedical industry with troves of data on human biological access points. And so we start by gathering and understanding where we are today with respect to the knowledge that we have. And this, in essence, becomes training data for
Mm,
our algorithms. So in order for artificial intelligence to work, it needs to learn on something. It needs to
right.
learn what patterns are indeed the patterns that we as its users are looking for. I don't know if you've seen online a really funny example of a blueberry muffin that looks like a chihuahua. And the artificial intelligence needs to learn what's a blueberry muffin and what's a chihuahua with respect
Mm,
to the eyes and the nose that look like blueberries.
sure.
Um, we need to train the algorithms to learn, and 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 we know a lot. We do know a lot of from both ancient societies and the most cutting edge biomedical data. That's what we use to train our algorithms. And so long as we can continue expanding the visibility into this dark matter of nutrition, we are poised to find the best answers that nature has to offer.
That's a great explanation. I've never heard anyone quite explain AI like that, and it makes so much sense. So thank you. I think that's perfectly said. So how did you find this phytonutrient that helps the liver function better?
Yeah, so it started with a really important question, which is when I co-founded Brightseed with Jim Flatt and Lee Che, my co-founders, the first question we asked was, what is the most important impact that we can have on human health? And very quickly, we got to metabolic health. It is an underlying condition that affects very, very large parts of the US population as well as the worldwide population. It's a chronic disease that does not have a drug to cure it.
Right.
And the liver is at the center of that, and the liver is a primary detoxifying organ of our bodies. So we with a really big problem, and then we started training our models on what we knew already about the kinds of compounds that would likely have a beneficial impact. And we very quickly, in a matter of months, actually found predicted in silico compounds that would work to unlock this mechanism that clears fat from liver cells. So we are still going through development phases, because once we find a hit and it works in initial biological validations, we need to make sure that it works throughout the entire eating and digesting,
Sure.
and ultimately have the beneficial effect in humans that we all seek. But we have found this nutrient in many plant sources, which is super exciting. We are working really hard to take it to market very quickly. And I think the biggest takeaway here is we are already sitting on the phytonutrients that can have a dramatic impact for health. We just need to know what they are so that we can design our supply chains and our products so that they are chock full of these phytonutrients, so that we can benefit from their impacts.
And what will those products look like? Are we talking about nutrition bars? Are we talking about pills? What exactly are
Yeah,
you sort of formulating?
I love it, and all of the above, because Brightseed is about enabling of the entire ecosystem and meeting the consumers where they are. So we partner with companies across that value chain, starting from the raw materials through to packaged foods and beverages, and including supplements and capsules. And our objective is to empower that ecosystem of players with nutrients that already exist in nature, so that they can incorporate them into their products. And the way that Brightseed can have the biggest impact is in partnership with others.
We've been talking a lot about sort of ancient cultures, and a lot has happened in the past where a product is found, or a new to us, a crop like quinoa or fonio, or all of these different kinds of things, and so they become sort of in vogue, and consumers want to buy as much of it as they can, but the farmers or the foragers, or the folks on the other side of it don't always get the true value of it. It does the money doesn't come back to them in many ways. How are you trying to prevent that?
I love that question, because if when Brightseed is broadly and widely successful, the first level of impact that we will have is starts with the farmer. So it starts with generating and knowing that you're generating highly valuable crops that allow for that value to be captured at step one in the supply chain, and then delivering those health benefits to the consumer at the very other end, when the consumer can benefit as well. So when we think at Brightseed about our partnerships, we see that ecosystem entirely, and hopefully when we're widely successful, all of the players in that supply chain can benefit, starting with the farmer and ending with the ultimate consumer.
When, not if. I like it. When you're wildly successful, not if. So you've recently started a partnership with Danone North America. And I'm wondering, what that brings to Brightseed.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful partnership, and we love working with Danone because they are so committed to providing health through food to as many people worldwide. With Danone, we're doing precisely the heavy lifting of illuminating the crops within their supply chain, really having the deepest look ever at the dark matter of nutrition for the crops that power many of their products. So once we illuminate that, then we start making connections between the phytonutrients present in their raw materials and the health benefits that these phytonutrients can have to enable Danone to deliver products that are very, very nutrient rich. And this is the beginning of a long-term, a multi-phased relationship, and we're really excited to be working with them in particular because they can have such a big impact on such a large population worldwide.
Absolutely. This idea of nutrient density, I mean, we've gone, just in the 2000s from, the food and financial crisis that began in 2007, 2008, and then lingered. There was this focus on, quantity and calories and just getting people food. And this shift now in nutrient density is something that I think a lot about because, as we talked about, COVID has sort of exposed in so many ways the cracks not just in our food system but in our healthcare system and these diet related and metabolic diseases that come about. Is that something when you started the company that was really part of your mission to focus not on just like, okay, we got to get as much of this produced as possible, but really focusing on the quality and that nutrient density part?
You nailed it. You nailed it. I think it's really interesting to look at the history of the food system. And after World War II, precisely that, we focused on increasing the amount of calories in the food system. Unbeknownst, however, to the industry and the ecosystem at the time, we achieved a high calorie but low nutrient food system. And that's precisely what Brightseed wants to change. We want this to be a high nutrient food system. And it all starts with the question, what are the nutrients that we want to maximize?
Hmm.
And that is why looking into the dark matter of nutrition and using AI technology to do so really effectively is paramount. We can
Yeah.
see the phytonutrients that matter and then help the entire ecosystem deliver those nutrients to the people that need them the most.
So it's not only Danone that will benefit, you're thinking about other companies as well.
Precisely, precisely. And this is Brightseed's way of working. We think, much like we think that like technology in the service of nature is a breakthrough way to think about using cutting edge technology. Having impact through partnership can maximize and multiply the impact that Brightseed can have on the world. So is one of many partners that Brightseed works through and empowers so that we can reach as many people as possible.
Well, and I like what you're saying about technology in the service of nature, but it's also in the service of people. And I think, that's part of this whole sort of, companies like yours that are mission driven. That it's less about the profit and more about the impact and the positive impact on the environment, on human health, on things like social justice. I think it's very interesting that you live in an area where so many of these startups are mission driven and you don't have to sort of pivot to include a mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the sort of I think when venture capitalists started investing in food, it was kind of the other way around. It was like, let's get this product out there and make a lot of money. But now it's sort of reversed, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really positive part of what's happening right now. You live in this area, you would know better than me.
That I think that's the spot on. I do believe that we're all realizing that the private sector and venture-backed companies can have a much more lasting effect on society and therefore be a much more successful business when we address things that matter. fundamentally
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
And I think Brightseed is not only at the intersection of critical health and nutrition concerns, um, with an exciting scalable business model, but also using the latest cutting edge technology, which is also very much a part of Silicon Valley. How can we
Right.
leverage um, uh, the latest scientific and technological tools to enable um, impact at a large scale?
What have your biggest challenges been as you've been developing this? And I'm sure, we're seeing sort of the fruition of it, and it looks like it's becoming successful, but this is many years of work. What challenges did you face along the way?
I like how you're asking the question in hindsight. I think we still have a lot of challenges that we work
Sure.
through, and we'll continue to work through and hopefully overcome as we grow as a company. Um, I think um, it's a good question. I think we've been challenged in a couple of ways. One, um, ultimately, the health impact is measured in human bodies and in very high standard human clinical trials. So, irrespective of all of the exciting work we do in discovery and in illuminating these answers in
Right.
phytonutrients in plants, we still Brightseed still holds that very high bar on the impact that nutrition has.
Mm,
And I think that's a really important. Um, I'm framing it as a challenge because it's an important standard that we hold ourselves to, which separates out um, uh, companies that work in nutrition from fluff or stories to those that are really science backed and that
yeah.
can are committed to having a real health impact as far as science can shed a light on. So it's been a really powerful journey to partner with the world's leading scientific labs, to bring on board world leading medical and clinical experts to the Brightseed team and really kind of walk that walk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I don't, this is something that's hard to criticize, but when I introduced you, I said Brightseed is a biotechnology startup, right? And when people hear biotech, sometimes
Mhm.
that takes up all the oxygen in the room. So I'm wondering, what do your critics say about this?
Good question. We um, in the world of food tech and also in biotech, the connotation is you're messing with my food.
Right.
You're growing something in a petri dish. You're splicing things that are not natural, and that is can have an undesirable effect in from a consumer perspective in particular. So I think there are very important technologies that are accelerating really laudable goals in those areas. But Brightseed is indeed a little bit different. I think all of our technology and all of our investment is in the service of nature, is to understand it more deeply than ever been able to do. So I do think that's a really important distinction in the food and biotech world.
Sure.
Um, we've uh, hopefully it is becomes clear over time, and that we're this kind of player, and there are many ways in which companies can have an impact and technologies can have an impact, but we're really committed to focusing our tech and science in this way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of education and awareness building has to happen so that when folks look at these terms and, think about technology in the food system, that they really understand what it's trying to do. And, as I started out this conversation, technology isn't a silver bullet. It's not always good and it doesn't always solve problems. It can make people a lot of money, but it doesn't always solve problems that farmers or eaters actually need. So there's a lot of discerning and, sort of investigating that needs to go on when people are making choices.
Yeah.
Given that, you're doing something that uses food as medicine, and this is
Mhm.
something that we've also seen, happen more and more during COVID. It's not just about nutrition and nutrient density, but really using food as our first medicine. Do
Mhm.
you think that, that will attract more investors?
I It's certainly been an area, food as medicine, that has gotten a lot more attention in the past few years, and the ability to um, enable a whole new era on precision nutrition is what Brightseed brings to
Mm,
the table.
yeah.
So we, for the first time ever, were able to take a very close look at the molecular connections between the phytonutrients that we ingest and the impact that these have in our bodies.
Right.
Um, and there are so many broad and important applications of that. It's a really exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, but before COVID just took over my mind, I was thinking a lot about personalized nutrition
Hmm.
and how that was really growing, and how, people can work with their doctors or their nutritionists and really figure out the things that work for them the best, whether
Hmm.
they're talking about their microbiome or preventing, diseases that might, genetic or otherwise, that might affect them. So it's a really interesting, but I liked
Hmm.
your term, precision nutrition, because
Hmm.
you're really pinpointing things.
Hmm. And that's where, in order to be that precise, we may know a lot, and we're starting to know a lot about each other and ourselves, right? We know,
Right.
if we do our DNA swabs, where we can get a much deeper look at our microbiome. We need to match that high resolution on the plant world as well,
Right.
so that we can enable these connections
Mm,
in the unit that matches, if that makes
sure.
sense. And this is what Brightseed shines a light on the plant world.
And what do you think your role is in helping change that discourse around food as medicine? What can Brightseed do to make that sort of, more well known, a bigger part of people's lives?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I hope that Brightseed can um, you know raise the discussion that, and confirm that food is indeed health, and it is a much more powerful lever than medicine. And because when we have this level of precision and understanding about what we consume in our everyday lives impact us from a health outcomes perspective, it starts to become a tool for health and for healthcare. And it
Right.
is really obvious that it is um, much more powerful than waiting until you have a disease diagnosed and then having some, medicine for years on end if you're
Right.
chronically ill. The reason though why that hasn't happened is because it's really hard advice to follow when your doctors say lose 10 pounds and exercise every day. And,
Right.
and the data shows that people just can't do it. We're actually genetically wired, and to be, it's very, very hard to do that. So um, if we can increase that level of visibility into the molecular connections between plant and human health, then this preventative health lever starts to become really powerful and important. And we can start to use it as a tool for global health policy.
Yeah. I mean, and I think one thing that's interesting that, I've been talking to people like Dariush Mazafarian at the
Mm-hmm.
Tufts Nutrition School, and Dan Glickman, our former US Secretary of Agriculture, is
Mm-hmm.
that doctors are not getting nutrition education, right? When they go to medical school, there's a couple of hours on one day that they get nutrition education. The same is happening in our schools. Kids are not getting nutrition education. So that the more that we're all sort of talking about these things, because
Exactly.
our institutions are not living up to they're not setting a high bar for getting people to know more about actual nutrition. Yeah, I think again, this is something where I think this year has really changed things. People are thinking more about nutrition, their own personal health, the how public health really impacts all of us and that we need to be concerned.
100%. And Brightseed is very, very committed to supporting that shift, that macro shift. And it starts also with um, the focus of where we invest our research dollars at a
Right,
country level. We can there are relatively very little funds going towards nutrition investment compared
right,
to disease or curing of disease.
right.
And so that is Brightseed is a member of a coalition that is just published a white paper actually with the leadership of Dari Masafarian from Tufts University to help move the conversation in that direction. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we're starting to now have the tools to deeply understand it. And it's exciting to think how quickly we can have an impact if we can align on that effort.
Yeah, that shift in investment would just mean so many things. But again, it gets back to what I asked before, like who's in control, who's making money, and the pharmaceutical giants have made, they've made bank on keeping people sick. And so this is a real shift. And so I hope that, you and others can really, put your efforts toward making that shift happen. And I'm so glad to know that you're in touch with Tufts. They're the leading experts on the role of nutrition and creating not just a healthier person, but for protecting the planet. If we're doing these things in the right way, we can nourish ourselves and the world. Before I ask the last question, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. They can go to brightseedbio.com. Are there any other handles or websites you want to give out?
Yes, Brightseed Twitter is on Twitter, and same on LinkedIn. So thanks for the interest and for following us. There's a lot more to come.
That's great. So what's next? What's down the pike? What do your next 6 months look like?
Exciting stuff in the next 6 months. I think we talked about Danone today. We are multiplying those partnerships across Brightseed's kind of technological capabilities, and so this is what we're focused on in the rest of the year, accelerating the impact that we can have in partnership with others.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you could join us today. I learned so much. This was a really incredible conversation. I hope folks will join me on our next episode when I'll be chatting with Jeanette Weiland, who will talk about her children's book, Red Beans and Rice, and the importance of Southern food culture. Sophia, thank you so much. Good luck with all your work, and please stay well.
And thanks so much.